All right, hello. We are back. This video is going to serve as a replacement for your in-class lecture for the week, just like the last video did. Um, this week is going to be week 12, so we're covering chapter 12, just as we have all semester long. Well, or tried to anyway. Um, and as you can see on the screen here, it's going to cover three things. We're going to cover Module 10, Chapter 12, and comma usage, and Assignment 5, Division and Classification. Currently, what we're looking at right now is the due date for your rough draft for this paper is going to be 1 week from today on April 16th. And then the final draft is going to be due 4 days later on Monday, April 20th. It should give you guys a pretty good week and a half, a little bit over a week and a half to do this, which we'll get into what exactly this is near the end of the video. Hopefully this one is not as long as the last one. All right. Module 10. Let's take a look at Module 10. Well, not literally take a look at Module 10, but let's take a look at an example from Module 10. Bear with me one moment. I'm going to pull up an example here. All right. So Module 10 is basically it's just using sentence variation, and most of the time what it amounts to as far as this module is concerned is it's helping you get rid of simple sentences, which is a serious problem for beginning writers, and many comp teachers will call you out on it, so you need to practice it. This is something that we've been doing all semester. I might have mentioned it in passing to you when I was critiquing your paper earlier in the semester when we were still in class, and I might have made this comment on any of your papers that you've done for an online critique from me. So let's just get up an example here. And yay, it worked. All right, so the module for this week is going to give you a sentence, or two sentences, rather. And it is going to be your job to try and combine them to make a more diverse way of saying it, and not just saying velociraptors hunted in packs. Oops. They were highly effective predators. Lots of you guys have problems with short, simple sentences like this that can be easily combined into multiple sentences. And of course, it's English. There's more than one way you can do this, but as always, you are going to have to pick the best option that the assignment or the it's unnaturally big, but I don't care, that the module has afforded you. So you'll have to pick the best option out of 4 usually after combining these two sentences, and that is the gist of it. It's 10 questions of that. Every time it'll give you a sentence or two. You'll have to combine them in a way that makes sense and is unique. Let's just give you an example up here. Let's see. Okay. So this one has only given you 2 options to choose from, which makes it easier, right? In case you don't know. So notice that both of these sentences are grammatically correct. All right, but one is better than the other. And 1, 2, 3, if you haven't guessed it yet, B is the correct answer. Because velociraptors hunted in packs, they were highly effective predators. Now, why is this one better than the other one? Well, it's because we have a cause and effect situation here. They were highly effective predators because they hunted in packs. These two sentences are related to each other. So you want the one that reflects cause and effect and not treats them as separate sentences or separate subjects. So take A, for example, here. Velociraptors hunted in packs and they were highly effective predators. While that is grammatically correct, it doesn't make sense to put it in a comma or in a compound sentence because doesn't make sense to do a compound sentence because these two effects are not equal. Well, these two halves of the sentence are not equal. One causes the other. So just be watching out for that when you're going through the module. If you have any questions with the module, go ahead and send me an email if you're having problems with it. And let's go ahead and move on to Chapter 12, comma usage. Let's go down here. No, not right there. There. Chapter 12, mechanics and the 4 basic comma rules. So, here we have a little bit of an example about why you want to learn to use comma as well. To sum it up, it's basically because it can alter the meaning of your sentence accidentally if you mess up your comma. And here we have an example. So, consider the infamous statement. A panda eats, shoots, and leaves. Whoa, that's one lethal panda. And you don't want eating at your vegetarian restaurant. There are no earthly or extraterrestrial reasons for the commas after eats and shoots. They separate the verb eats from the direct object shoots and leaves. So what this is talking about is that the commas in the sentence alter the meaning of it. A panda eats, shoots, and leaves. A panda eats, shoots, and a panda eats, leaves. Okay? A panda does not walk into a restaurant, eat, shoot it up, and then leave. Okay? So, very important to get your comma placement in the sentence down. And here are the four rules that are going to help you with that. Making sure you guys can see it on the screen. So, comma rule number 1. Use a comma and a coordinating conjunction to join two complete thoughts, aka independent clauses. We have done this all semester, as I'm sure you've been doing since grade school, for all you native speakers. For all of you international English as a second language speakers, this is probably something you picked up on pretty early as well. Notice here, Akira Kurosawa was the greatest Japanese director of all time. That is an independent clause and can be treated as its own statement. Fans still enjoy his films worldwide. Also an independent clause and can be treated as a complete sentence. And they are both conjoined by a comma and conjunction, and it makes the sentence grammatically correct, and it's perfectly okay to have this. I'm not going to spend too much time on that one. That one should be pretty obvious to most of you. Comma rule number 2. Use a comma to set off an introductory phrase or clause. This is something that a lot of you guys have problems with. Here, check this one out. After he graduates, Cyrus plans to become a millionaire. So you can see that the introductory clause is separate from the sentence. Cyrus plans to become a millionaire. We have a subject, a verb, and the direct object over here. And you can see that it's separated from the introductory clause. which is set off by after. Let's see here. Okay, yeah, so this is a good point the book makes here. Don't worry about the length of the introductory phrase or clause. Just confidently place a comma after it. I have seen tons of people completely confused on comma usage. A lot of handbooks and teachers say wrong things, but you should know that like little sayings like this, use a comma to set off a long introductory phrase or clause. Well, what does long mean? It's subjective, right? So, in other words, a phrase or a group of two or more words is a group of two or more words. So any phrase automatically qualifies as a introductory clause if it's set off with the proper word usage. So don't worry about the length of the introductory clause. An introductory adverb such as consequently, unfortunately, ironically, or surprisingly is typically set off with a comma, despite its conspicuous lack of length. So be confident. Use commas to separate the items in a series. And yes, use a comma before and before the and that joins the last item. So, Tadwell, you guys have also been doing this all semester, so I'm not too worried about this one for you guys, but we're going to go over it anyway. So, this guy's list of favorite authors includes Xenophon, Xerxes, Zenobia, Xanthippe, and J.R.R. Tolkien. Alright, so why do I maintain that the comma before the and is essential? Read the following sentence. Bathsheba loves to read romances set in the Regency area with its luxurious coaches, elegant cotillions, livery-clad servants wearing powdered wigs and cobblestones. Livery-clad servants wearing powdered wigs and cobblestones. So notice that because there's no comma right here after wigs, that it now appears that these servants are now wearing cobblestones. So you needed a comma to separate these two. So, comma rule number 4. Use a comma after the transition word, aka conjunctive adverb that follows a semicolon. John Wayne Randolph Rogers was named after his parents' favorite Western movie stars. Consequently, he always wears a Stetson hat, a bib front, cavalry shirt, Levi jeans, and an area of boots. Similarly, we have another example here. Anastasia Penelope Edmonton believes she is the reincarnation of the Russian Tsarina, Anastasia Romanov. However, her cat, Rasputin, does not share her opinion. So, this is very similar to before on this previous page, where it says that you can use adverbs such as consequently, unfortunately, ironically, or surprisingly, except this one is after a semicolon. So be sure that you use commas after little transitionary words like this, after a semicolon. All right. So let's take a look at this worksheet here for a second. We're going to do a few of these. So in the examples below, insert a comma or commas wherever necessary. Conversely, remove any unnecessary commas. If all of the commas in a sentence are correctly placed, then write correct beside it. Be able to explain why you placed a comma in a specific place or why, conversely, you do not insert any commas. Alright, and we're going to be doing this. I'll do it and I'll point out which rule that I'm using to place the comma. For many aficionados of Western movies, John Wayne remains the quintessential cowboy star. So, let's go back. Obviously, we don't have a semicolon, so this one's not applying. Well, this one's not applying. So let's go back to this one. Use commas to separate items in a series. So in that one, we don't really have a list. I have lost my... There it is. In this problem, we don't really have a list, so we don't want you to use that one. Use comma to set off an introductory phrase or clause. Okay, we kind of... Do we have one of those? I keep on getting mixed up where we're at. There we are. For many aficionados of Western movies, John Wayne remains the quintessential cowboy star. So we can separate this into two different halves. And we can call this, I wish I could write on this page, or on the screen. We can call this one the introductory clause. And we can say that John Wayne was the subject. This is the verb. And we have a direct object over here. So the comma needs to go right there. Although George Lucas acknowledges his debt to Akira Kurosawa and John Ford, his real source of inspiration for Star Wars was Joseph Campbell. Okay, so this one, unlike the last one, it has the problem of too many commas. What this sentence is showing is, yeah, it just has way too many commas. So, off the bat, we're going to remove this one. Although George Lucas acknowledges his debt to here. Alright, so we're going to move this one, this one, this one, and this one. So it reads, although George Lucas acknowledges his debt to Akira Kurosawa and John Ford, comma, wait, no. Sorry, I messed that up. It should read like this. Although George Lucas acknowledges his debt to Akira Kurosawa and John Ford, comma, his real source of inspiration for Star Wars was Joseph Campbell. There we go. There we go. So the only comma should be right there. All these other commas should not be. Thanks to the popularity of the Marvel Universe superhero films, many young fans have begun to study Greek and Norse mythology. This one is good. This one is fine. There's nothing wrong with this one. And there's nothing wrong with this one because it follows the same rule as number 1. It has an introductory clause. Thanks to the popularity of the Marvel Universe superhero films. We know this is the introductory clause. Oh, hold on a minute. Oop. We know that this is the introductory clause because it does not have, well, it's not a complete thought. It's not a complete sentence. So if you just put this by itself and just completely discounted the rest, thanks to the popularity of the Marvel Cinematic Universe films, then what? It just sounds like a sentence that's halfway done. Half of a sentence, rather. Alright, next one. Thor, Loki, and Odin are traditional figures in Norse mythology. However, Tony Stark is conspicuously absent from the Aesir pantheon. Okay, so we can look at this one, and we do have a semicolon in this one. So according to this right here, on the at the top of the page I was already on, we can look for a transitionary word after the semicolon. And there it is. So, and it's even the same word. So just put a comma right after that transitionary word. Not going to do any more. I think you guys have a pretty good handle on how to use commas. I haven't noticed too many of your mistakes being centered around commas. A lot of the times, what will happen is you guys will put a comma, but you'll leave out the conjunction to make it a compound sentence. I've explained that problem to many of you in your critiques when I do the online versions, and most of the time you guys also have a problem about where to put your comma after your introductory phrase. Highly recommend you review this chapter and review these question 1 and question 3 when you are going over your critique and fixing it for the final draft. Let's take a look at what we have next here. The division and classification essay. All right, we'll read that over here in a minute. Actually, no, we'll read it right now. There it is. Make sure you guys can read this. All right. Hopefully you can read it. Okay. Assignment 5, division and classification. You will pick a subject to divide and classify. This essay will be a test of your organization and analytical skills, even more so than the comparison contrast was. So your goal for this assignment is you must explain the significance of each thing you divide off your subject. For example, your subject may be a basketball team. In this case, you would divide the team into its 5 players and explain each of their roles. Alternatively, you could pick a device and divide and classify its parts. Choose your topic wisely. Okay? Do not try to do a semi-truck and break it down into all of its 40,000 pieces and explain the relevance of each part. Obviously, I'm exaggerating here, but you need to make sure that this fits into 12 to 15 sentences. We even bold the sentences. A good topic can be explained well within the length requirement of the paper and can also reach that length requirement. Your paper will be 12 to 15 sentences long, no exceptions, unless I just think you have a fantastic idea and I don't want to get rid of your sentences. Put your name in the top left-hand corner and put your title in the center of the page on the next line. Begin writing on the line below your title. Your paper will have Times New Roman 12-point font and be double-spaced. Ignore this section of it now that we are all online. You're still going to have to turn your paper in to turnitin.com, but of course you don't have to submit a physical copy to me in class. Your thesis statement. You'll be graded on your thesis statement. A good thesis will adequately give the subject of the paper and can be proven throughout the paper. So, aka your thesis will equal a subject plus an opinion. So, for example, my personal computer, PC, is a finely tuned machine that can run any game at the highest settings, turning any game into a wonderful experience for the player. Supporting details. A supporting detail is a detail added to your paper with the sole purpose of supporting your thesis statement. If a supporting detail does not directly support your thesis statement, you may explain why it does. Failure to do so, though, will result in a loss of points. For example, the primary parts for my computer are the central processing unit, motherboard, random access memory, and video card. And that sentence right there, I would put in the introduction to preview the organization of the paper. And after this, all you do is you explain the significance of that part, in this case, with the computer. If you're doing like a basketball team, you'll explain that player's role. Okay? So the CPU is an Intel i9 9900K. Hold on, there's a space there that's not supposed to be. Wait, no. There's a 9 there that's missing. That's not supposed to be. My CPU is an Intel i9 9900K overclocked to 5.0 gigahertz, and it is the brain of the computer that dictates the speed at which programs run. Your conclusion will be one sentence. It will have a brief summary of your paper and reiterate your thesis statement in a way that proves it. For example, these parts create a divine experience for any user who chooses to play games on my high-end gaming PC. So ideally this would obviously come after you've explained all these other parts, not just one of them. Make sure that if you preview an organizational pattern in this top part right here, you actually follow it. Some people were having some problems with that in the last essay. Additionally, when you make your thesis and you make your conclusion and they're only one sentence, don't leave them hanging like this below the last paragraph. Back it up and actually make it a part of the last paragraph. Oh, hello? Oh. Okay. Length requirement, meet the length requirement, focus. Stay on topic and be concise. If you are breaking down a basketball team and you get to, let's say you're doing all the positions. I have no idea what all the positions are. Don't make fun of me. Let's say you do the center, point guard, forward, and you're doing forward, and then you get off on a tangent about how Michael Jordan was the best basketball player of all time and LeBron can shove it. I don't want any of that. Remember, 12 to 15 sentences. If you've got 5 basketball players on a basketball team, that means you're probably going to do 2 sentences for each of them. That's 10 sentences right there. On top of that, that leaves you 1 sentence for the thesis, 1 sentence for the conclusion. That's 12. And you might have a sentence to preview the organization of your paper. That's 13. Okay? So just please plan ahead on this. You can do this over, like all my essays, you can do this over basically anything you want. And I do that because it forces you to choose your topic wisely, okay? I can't emphasize that enough, and I hope you guys are getting some real good practice in doing that before you go to comp. Now, let's see. By the way, this is available on Blackboard, just in case no one knew that. Let's see what your book has to say about division and classification. So, in the previous chapter, we compared and contrasted 2 quantities. Although we did not make a point of it at the time, for the comparison and contrast to be logical, the 2 quantities needed to belong to the same class of objects or animals. It would be completely illogical to compare and contrast an ice cream cone with a giraffe. Logically, an earlier step would be to take the major class to which both quantities belong and break it down into meaningful subclasses, aka division and classification. There is a simple logical process for doing so. The process for breaking down a large group into smaller subgroups can be demonstrated by using a 2-pound bag of M&M peanuts as the major class. What classifying principle immediately suggests itself? Color, of course. If we're right, then as a classifying principle, color will yield 1. Meaningful subclasses, 2. Mutually exclusive subclasses, all-inclusive subclasses, and a manageable number of subclasses. So let's go back to the basketball team example. Let's say you have a basketball team of 5 players. That's the major subclass. All right? Now, let's break it down into a... hold on, let me see if I can do something. The basketball team is the major class. And let's do... What classifying principle immediately suggests itself of the basketball team? Player roles, right? Oh, I got a text. Unimportant. So what classifying principle will help separate our major class, the basketball team? Well, the players' roles, of course. You can separate them by forward, point guard, shooting guard, and the center. It's 4. I can't think of any others, but you get what I'm saying. And you can explain the significance of each of those. Another text. Okay. So that's one example that you could do. And of course, this goes more in depth on dividing the bag of M&M's peanuts by color. Oh, hello. Let's go over here. All right, so looking at an example here, your book has 2 examples. This has a classification of folding knives by the number of blades. Really good topic. However, notice this is way longer than 12 to 15 sentences. Okay, so whatever you choose, just make sure that it's in 12 to 15 sentences. But I also would not put little headings to separate them. Just make it like a normal essay. But this person's topic and separation of each of the... So this person's topic is knives, and they have divided and classified the topic knives into single-bladed, penknife, folding hunters, self-defense knives, and double-bladed knives. Very, very good. Oh, way more knives than I thought. Classification of audio recordings by media. All right, so this person has chosen the major class of audio recordings, and they have chosen to break it down by media forms as the classification. So they've got wax and tin foil. I've never even heard of that one. Vinyl, I have heard of that one. Tape recorders. And, oh, apparently 2 different types of tape recorders. Compact discs, I'm more familiar with that. Solid states and the conclusion. Also a good topic. Again, make sure 12 to 15 sentences, of course. I mean, you could do different types of pizza. Different types of pizza would be cool. I've seen, let's see here. Let's choose pizza. Okay, we can do pizza. And I've seen normal pizza, which is like pepperoni and sausage. It's savory. It's dinner, right? I've seen dessert pizza, which is basically just like a gigantic sheet of cookie dough. Also, if you're an international student and you haven't had dessert pizza, you really, really should. Or 3, breakfast pizza, which is basically like, it's like a breakfast burrito, but instead of rolled up in a tortilla, it is on pizza crust. That's kind of what it's like. And you could classify each of those and explain why those are important or why they're awesome or, you know, whatever. The book has multiple examples here. It has laptop computers, desktop computers, printers, cell phones, earphones, pets, bicycles, motorcycles, trucks, passenger vehicles, swords, armor. Ooh, swords is a really good one. Video games, video game consoles. So I particularly big fan of video games, as I'm sure you guys have gathered from the rest of the semester. So for video games, you could do first-person shooters, and then you could split it up. Call of Duty, Players Unknown Battleground, Battlefield 5, Far Cry. You see how many times you could go through this. Video game consoles. That one's pretty much self-explanatory. What do you got? You got PC, Xbox. Well, actually, PC is not considered a console. Scrap that one. Xbox, PlayStation 5, Nintendo Switch. Really, really good. You could even separate it even more into handheld consoles. Well, a Switch would make a really good transition for that. You could go to, you go to the PlayStation Vita. That's actually really old now. You could also go to the DS. I don't have another thumb. And you could go to, now that I think about it, Xbox doesn't have one. That's weird. Anyway, you get the idea. For trucks, you could easily do something like Ford, Chevy, Toyota, and you can explain what each of them's best use case is. Or you can explain different types of trucks like short bed, long bed, or the one, I'm not sure what they're called, sorry if I'm making anybody cringe. The ones with the beds completely off of them and they don't have any sides and they just have like a flat, like a complete, I guess a flat bed, I don't know. Headphones, the difference between the AirPods and something like these big over-the-ear headphones, that would be a good one. Movies is really good. Separated into its genres. Be careful though, so don't use pre-existing classification systems such as rating scale for tornadoes or hurricanes, the Richter scale for earthquakes, or the American Kennel Club listing of dog breeds. So nothing too obligatory. It does need to be your own essay. It must be original. If you decide, now that I've already said it, if you decide to do the movies, I do not want a definition of what a horror movie is. Okay? I don't want a definition of what a comedy movie is. Okay? They need to be your own words, and they need to be original. Alright? You will hear about it from me if you are unoriginal. I promise you that. And with that, I hope you guys are all doing well. Remember that there are examples of this and all of your other essays that you're going to be signed on Blackboard. So this is your Blackboard shell. Go to Classroom Resources, Essay Examples, and you can pick out a division and classification right here to use as an example. I highly recommend you do this. It helps a ton. If you have any questions, of course, email me. Email. I answer them within the day, probably. But anyway, I hope you guys are all doing well, and I will see you and probably make another video in a week and a half when this is due. Have a good rest of your day.